Welcome to the webinar. Today we're going to talk about common pitfalls to avoid in K grants. And my name is Ope Adeoye, and I'm one of the K12 multiple PIs. If you go into the next slide, Megan. So here my fellow PIs, Dr. Numar is our contact PI, is at the University of Michigan. Dr. Donofrio is at Yale, and Dr. Callaway is at Pitt. And all four of us today are going to go over um, uh, these pitfalls related to K applications. Next slide. So the one thing to keep in mind, especially if your mentor hasn't served on these study sections, is that Ks are reviewed differently than R or independent grants. The purpose of the K is mainly to invest in you to facilitate your development into an independent investigator who then may pursue R grants down the line. And so the review criteria start with the candidate and then the career development a plan, a career goals and objectives, and the research plan, which is where most of us tend to spend our time, right? We tend to sort of, we're going to produce the world's best science on unknown to anybody before. And that is an important part because if your science is bad, you're not going to be able to justify the K. But the bottom line is you don't want to forget all these other parts, right? The mentorship team really matters. Like I said, the goal is to develop you into an independent investigator. If your mentorship team does not include people who have walked that path, it's hard to imagine how they would be able to mentor you on that path. And then your environment and the support, the care requires a lot of time for you to develop. And so the institution, your department heads really have to demonstrate a commitment to you as a candidate for the K. For our K-12, for this program, we also then conduct interviews as in addition to these sort of traditional elements of the K review process. Next slide. So I'm going to talk about the candidate review really briefly, and then I think Cliff is next after me. The things that they're looking for in the candidate is you have to be really good but not too good, right? And what you're saying is you have to give this narrative, and the narrative aspect is really important. This is how I started, and this is what I've done, and this is what I learned, and I've gotten really good at this. But boy, for me to go on to that next level, I really need A, B, and C, right? So this compelling story of your prior training, your research experience, your demonstrated commitment to research, and the kind of work you've done in terms of the academic, clinical, and research record of high quality. You've published these 2 or 3 or 10 really important papers, and you're now ready to sort of pursue this as your life's goal. And as part of that process, you've learned these things, but you need these additional things that you're going to sort of get the training in. And so that's the candidate narrative in a nutshell. And I think for most people, it's a straightforward story, but the way you tell it really, really matters. Next slide. So a couple of do's and don'ts for the candidate section. Again, don't ignore this part. A part of it is like um, convincing yourself and being sort of comfortable in your own story. And I think it's actually good reflection to say, this is what I'm doing, and this is how I want to do it, and this is where I want my career to be. And I think if you can do that well and be earnest in doing that, and you're able to demonstrate this commitment to a research career, your passion for this particular topic that you're pursuing and why you're pursuing it. If you have some compelling personal, individual, family, friend story, included. It is a genuine narrative of why you're doing what it is that you're doing. And again, describe the work you've done to date, how you got to this point, and say, here are the things that I'm missing, and here's why I need the K. So you have to be good, and then you have to say you need these other things to make you great, for lack of a better description. And I think that's my last slide. I'll turn it over to Cliff.
Thanks, Ope. The next section, we're going to talk about the career development plan. And, as we're going through this, it reminds me that you are getting this advice on writing K grants. You hopefully only ever have to write two. You've done this K12, and then you're going to write an individual K. You don't want to become a professional K grant writer. You're going to write many, many project grants, many research grants in your career. But these career development grants have these sections: the career development plan, the candidate section, and the mentoring plan, which are kind of weird. And they are always the parts that feel artificial in your writing and awkward sometimes because you're talking about yourself. So it's the one grant that's like about you, and it's always hard for us to talk about ourselves. So in this section in the career development plan, it has these components. What is the likelihood that this plan is going to contribute to your scientific development? How is this appropriate for the goals you have and the research experience you're planning? And is it appropriate in the context of what you've done before? This requires that you know what you want to become. So some of the best advice I heard was, you have to envision what kind of researcher you're going to be. You're going to be a clinical trialist. You're going to be a health services researcher. And in this section, do you show where you are now and what gaps there are that you would do better if you had additional development experiences to get you there? Megan, let's go on to the next slide. That means it needs to be specific. This needs to be something that is really about your particular skills now and the skills you want to have at the end of the career development plan. You don't want it to be overly ambitious, where you're, going to do more than can be done in the scope of a 4 or 5 year K grant. It is very good to make it gap-based, where you say, I am aware that I know this much statistics, but I need to learn this other advanced field. And so I'm going to take a course in that advanced field. Tables are very good strategies to show that kind of gap mapping to the activities in your plan. Show how it matches up with your research plan too. We talk later about the research objectives. What in those research experiences and the accomplishment of your research project is it going to do to put more tools in your toolkit as part of your career development? And ideally, this plan leads to you being independent and unique at the end. It's if I have all these experiences, I'm going to be somebody with unique skills that will make me a vital part of the research workforce. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, pivoting a little bit, the research plan. I'm going to gloss over this because we talk a lot about research and research grants. And everything you know about research grants and research projects and proposing them is true here. You can't skimp on this because it's a career development award. You do need to have good design methodology, indicate that the research is supported by some background data, hopefully your own data that then you're going to flesh out in a bigger way. Hit all the things that are important for rigor. Is this a robust and unbiased approach? Is the research plan appropriate for the scope of the Career Development Award? So is it something that you can actually do and your team can help you carry it off in a successful way? And then, link it back to your career development plan. Is this building skills? Let's go to the next slide for this. The biggest errors are, I think trying to cram too much in there. So the temptation is to put your whole career into the research plan, and it's only a K grant. It doesn't have a budget that lets you put everything that you're ever going to do into it. And it can't be, a large trial on a $30,000 budget. So, you want to have a research plan that's appropriate for the resources provided. Make sure that the scientific rationale, the justification, the hypothesis, the design, all those things that are very important for any research project are in there. But you do have limited space, so it may be more terse than in a grant where you had more pages to devote to this. Next slide there. Let's see if that's, and then we go to Gail.
Okay, good afternoon. I'm going to talk about mentors and co-mentors, and what's kind of interesting as this was all being put together is I had just reviewed a K award for an internal K that it wasn't an internal K, but it was an internal person at Yale who's trying to put together a K, and I was asked if I would review it. And it had many of the downfalls that I'll talk to you about here. So it really does, I unscored it as the score. But anyway, the most important thing is that you find these mentors that you feel can be very helpful to you in your process. And in terms of the RK, is that you need a primary mentor from your local site. This is somebody who has a lot of qualifications, that they actually have funding themselves, that they've been very productive in their program, and they don't necessarily have to be exactly an emergency physician or exactly in the area that you're doing, but in the expertise of funding to know how to help you move forward. Then you can have another EM person who is sort of like a secondary mentor at your site also, that has can be part of your broad team. And you can have a mentor from somewhere else too. I mean, you can have another mentor that is a very specific person. The point is to not have too many of these. So often people like say, I'm going to have these, tons of mentors. I'm going to have these tons of advisors. They put them all down. They say they're going to meet with them 1,000,000 hours a week, which they wouldn't even do anything if they met with them all. And then what was very clear, so it was interesting here, is that the mentor actually never read the project, because if they read the project, they would have said, oh my God, you can't do this because it's too overwhelming, just about what you've heard previously. So when you pick them, you want to pick really wisely. And again, if you need someone in your, I'm sure that there are exceptions to all this if we find somebody that's at a site that doesn't have exactly what, because it's possible to have mentors from other areas. We just have to be really careful in how, and I have done that with someone with a K at another institution, but it takes a lot of work in explaining how, in fact, you're going to do that. So, not to have too many. These are really a long list here about what you need to make sure that they are productive. They have, obviously, they have papers, etc. Their qualifications need to be quite extensive to be a mentor. And next slide. And so, this is so funny because this just happened. I wrote in my write-up meeting, it is clear that none of these famous, and they were famous mentors, right? Department chairs, like big people, blah, 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 that they had never read it. Because first of all, if they had read it, they would have been appalled, and they would have said, no, 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 you can't put this in. We have to rework this for a variety of different reasons. One of the things is you couldn't even read it because it was too small, and you couldn't even read the figures. So it was clear that they didn't know that. So you want to be really careful that you don't, that your mentors are very engaged in the process, and that you're very clear with how exactly each of them are going to work with you. and you can write down how you think that's going to happen in your timeline, and you're going to meet with them a certain amount. Don't over meet, because no one's going to meet with you 3 times a week. Or if you had 5 of them, they're not going to meet with you every week. That means 5 hours of just talking. So that's not going to do it well either. You do want to make sure that you have people in all different aspects. So if you're doing something that has maybe community participation in it, that you have somebody who understands how to do that kind of research. If there's mixed methods, you want to obviously make sure that you have somebody who can help you with that, even if your primary mentor is more of a clinical trialist, but you want to do some other work as well. You want to make sure you have those people, but not too many people. Just enough to kind of make sure you're covering each of those areas that you discussed. And we can go on to the next one. Okay, now this is around the environment and institutional commitment to the candidate. And this is very, very important that the institution has a clear commitment to you all, and a strong one, and they're enthusiastic about it. So not just is the mentor going to say why they are very happy in being with you, but is the facility, and I think this is where we talk about the chairs too, that have a strong commitment to making sure that you will succeed as an independent investigator. I think most of this stuff here is pretty self-explanatory. I don't want to read it all. But most people do well in environment, as you know, probably now when the NIH looks at this, these environment is like all included in the approach. And it's kind of assumed that you have great environments when you're from great institutions. But if you are from a smaller institution, then you obviously have to kind of say where you're coming from this. But I don't think this is going to be a problem in any of your situations. Go ahead. And these are just, again, some do's and don'ts, but the do things are making sure that your chair letter addresses all of the points that you ask. So for example, they have to actually say that you're going to get 75% of your time is going to be used for the K award, and they have to be very clear and write that down, that you're only going to have 25% clinical responsibilities. It has to really make sense that they care about you. So it doesn't read like, oh, I'm not sure that they really want this person. And if this person doesn't get the K, then we don't really want them here. This is a last ditch effort. It has to be like, we're interested in this individual. They have a lot of potential. We're going to work with them honestly, with or without the K. We're going to make sure that they do well in doing that. So you want to really be careful that you do that. And that chair letter has to say this. Just FYI, in this particular K, the chair has to agree that not only will you have the protected time that you need for the 3 years of the K, but they will give you protected time for the following 2 years, the same amount of time, that you'll have 75% protected time for the following 2 years. So they really need to know that you mean it.
Just clarify, 50% for the following 2 years.
I'm sorry. Thank you for saying that. I wrote down 75% or 50% for the next 2 years. Okay. And people can game that. So I just want to be careful, because I know people have gotten Ks certain places and they're working a lot of hours. I say, how's that possible? And they go, well, they say that our place has a 55-hour work week. All right. So therefore they can work more than like 12 hours a week clinically. That's not how it's expected to be, particularly in emergency medicine. So be careful with that. And you do want to, this is really important to me, having been a chair and even in the post chair working with people, is that you want to make sure that people are really engaged in the trajectory of a person's life and what they want to do. So you don't want to just stop. Like in this climate, people may not get the R's that they need to get or additional things. So I want to really be sure that people are committed to you, that if you're working really hard and you're writing papers and you're doing everything that you can, and you're in fundable areas, which you are in this award, that they will help you through the rest of the time that you're there, and not be, you won't have to be worried every 5 seconds, like, oh my God, I'm not going to make it. Um, Again, make sure that the mentors and cheerleaders really describe their level of enthusiasm for you. And you can put in extra levels of support if you need to have that for your project. So if you need to use a particular data set, for example, and it belongs to someone, they could write in that they're allowing you to use that. If it's some very specific training that you need or something that person can write in and saying that they are going to work with you. So extra letters that are of support are welcome. Do I have another one? And let me see if I forgot anything else. Nope, I think that was it. Did I forget anything, May?
Next, that was it. Yeah. All right, and Bob, I think you are next.
Yeah, I think I'm up and just in time. Sorry, I'm a little bit late joining. I was just finishing a clinical shift and sign out took a little longer than usual. So I'm Bob Newmar. I'm one of the faculty here at the University of Michigan, one of the co-directors of the program. And for those joining the webinar, it's great to have you here. Delighted that you're interested in this program. And purpose of this obviously is to help you learn more about the application process and how to be successful. So next up is a little bit about uh, tips for the K-12 interview process. So uh, in addition to a written application, we have a face-to-face retreat that the applicants are invited to. And our scoring and decision making on the K-12 applications is based both on the written application and then input from the face-to-face interviews. So we typically have any one candidate will typically have 4 to 5 interviews that last about 20 minutes. And in that interview is 3 or 4 of the people in the review group that are attending the retreat as well. So the goal of the interviews is to help the reviewers learn more about your career goals, the environment that you're in, your career development plan, and your proposed research project. So anything in the application is fair game for questions. And the interview can ideally the goal of the interview is to sort of help clarify anything that wasn't clear in the application and hopefully make your application stronger. Sometimes though, the how the interview comes across can also lower your scoring. So Megan has given us a few quotes from the previous interview that the interviews have written that includes, had some misgivings before the interview, have no misgivings after the interview, or the interview did not help the candidate, or I liked this more before the interview. So there's an opportunity to improve your likelihood of being funded, but also we want you to take the interview seriously so you don't decrease your score in any way. So one of the things that's also important about this process is we're trying to have you be successful in your research plan and career, whether you get funded or not. So often in the interview process, the reviewers will be giving suggestions, and it's always good to sort of acknowledge those suggestions with the interviewers and maybe not argue with them if they point out alternative strategies. And one quote that sort of we give as an example is if an interview suggests your training plan isn't specific enough or that you need coursework in a certain area, uh, either need very compelling reason why you don't need that, that you've done the work before, or you should respond in a way that how you would address those issues. So again, coming in prepared to um, more address the issues that the reviewers bring forward rather than sort of defend the way that the application was put forward. So some examples of things that may have made a positive impact on reviewers before is that the candidates brought in printouts with some additional information to share with the reviewers. They answer questions with a lot of detail, clarified things that reviewers had concerns about, or acknowledged a pitfall the interviewer noted and provided specific ideas how they would address it. And examples of things that might have had a negative impact in the review process or felt like the candidate dismissed the questions or was overconfident, the candidate was defensive, or the candidate had very simplistic knowledge about the topic area. So Next is just a final to finally sort of just give you one last overview of the program. Just a reminder that this is really for 3 years of funding at 75% dedicated research time, plus 40,000 a year for research programs. The goal is ultimately your success and the success of the program is that the funded scholars secure either an independent K or R01 or R01 equivalent funding by the end of the 3-year program, which by definition indicates that you'll be expected to be submitting either individual K or R level funding while you're still in the program, not afterwards. And the deadlines for this year are laid out here with August 14th or earlier having a letter of interest submitted, and which includes a draft aims page. And really, this is to help the applicants. So if you get that in, we need it in by the 14th, but also any earlier gives us more time to give you feedback on it and gives you more time to respond to that feedback in optimizing your application. But in addition, the letter of intent also the NIH staff will use that to determine whether the research program that you're submitting, the research project, is within the mission of the relevant institutes, with NINDS being the most important institute there, but also National Institute of Aging and National Institute of Drug Abuse will sponsor scholars if the research program being proposed and the research career plan is aligned with their mission. So I would encourage you actually to go to the websites of those institutes that are sponsoring this and read through the mission of their research program to sort of give you an idea of what fits and what doesn't fit. Then the full K-12 applications will be due on October 15th. The pipeline program is 2 weeks earlier, so that's October 1st. And then the actual retreat where the face-to-face discussion and interviews with the K applicants happens in addition to additional training, networking, and feedback you get from existing scholars, and the program will be December 1st through the 4th this year in Ann Arbor. So, anything else, Megan, I was supposed to cover?
No, this last slide is really just to give everyone a sense of the differences between the K-12 and the
Oh, yeah.
NIH K.
Yeah.
I don't know that we need to talk through specifics, but if people have questions, we could go into details. But I think I'm gonna flip to the next slide. I'm sure you guys all have you've seen our website, but there's the QR code. I'm gonna stop sharing this, but I can put slides back up if we need to look at anything else. But I think right now we just want to open it up for any questions. If you have specific questions about the K-12, about an NIH K, or even, obviously, I know some of the scholars might be thinking about R01. So if you have questions about, figuring out what you apply for next, we can answer any questions about helping you make sure that you're being strategic and setting yourself up to be competitive for whatever you're applying for next.
Hey, it's Ayal Pierce. If you are at an institution where maybe you don't have a lot of NIH funded EM researchers, how would you best, is it in your institution finding other NIH funded researchers as your mentor team, or is it maybe mentors not in your institution but are still in the EM space? How would you recommend going about that?
I'll answer that since it's mentors. I think it can be either depending on, where you are. If it's a very specific thing, you want to have a mentor that is an expert in that field. It could be somebody else along with somebody in your institution who's just funded and has done this before, right? And they can still help you, but in a very specific way, if you wanted a certain other place, you can look for that too. I think you could do it both ways. You certainly have to have a person who's an expert in your area somewhere on that team, right? And then here you have to have somebody in your institution, supposedly, but I'll leave that, Bob, when it's potentially that someone there isn't there, and then I guess we'll work that. You should query us when you put your
Yeah.
application in.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would say that your primary mentor would need to be someone who has a federal funding track record, and ideally has someone who has a track record of mentoring other early career investigators. So those two things, that they themselves have been competitive for federal funding, and they have had experience in mentoring people at your stage or near your stage. Um, so then the question is, that does not have to be someone whose primary specialty is emergency medicine. And more appropriately, it would be someone whose research is aligned with the research that you're proposing to do. Uh, then in addition, you should and could have a sort of, you could call it, and some people have categorized it, a career mentor, right? So that could be someone on your mentorship team who's in emergency medicine. Ideally, that would still be someone who's an emergency medicine investigator, federally funded. That could be at your institution. Maybe that could be at another institution if that doesn't exist in your institution. Um, so, having people in your mentorship team outside your institution is helpful and valuable if that doesn't exist in your own institution. But it might look weird if, like, you have 5 NIH funded EM investigators at your institution and your mentor is somewhere else. Right. The other thing I would say about mentors is um, the more you can demonstrate that relationship, working relationship already exists, and convey that in the application, the more likely it's going to be successful because, yeah, it doesn't usually fly if you just sort of pluck the most prominent person that you can find at your institution and make them your primary mentor, and you've never like worked with them before or published with them before or interacted with them before in any way, because that's just a high risk mentorship relationship that is unproven.
Yeah,
And
definitely don't do that. It's very aggravating when you see that. Like they just take these people because they're a big deal or they're known, but they're not really committed to you personally.
and it can be hard for you, but um, I think you have to sort of reach out and nurture that relationship. And it can be a little awkward, but you formally have to say, I need a mentor. Would you be willing to mentor me? Right. And then if they do have this track record, they know what that means. And so they should not sort of push you along unless they're actually willing to, unless they agree to that request. That what Gail was saying about, it is apparent when the mentor hasn't read it, right? And so sometimes that's on the mentee, sometimes that's on the mentor. Sometimes you have a mentee that's moving too fast. Other times you have a mentor that is moving too fast. And so it's readily apparent to the reviewer that the mentor did not read this or didn't read it carefully. And so I would just be mindful of that part of it, but then you have to, if it's a pulmonologist or neurologist at your institution that you're going to approach for mentorship and you don't know them, but they agree to mentor you, right? You ask and they agree to mentor you. They should not have you go roughshod without appropriately sort of tugging back on you in some fashion.
When when people ask me for help, and when I ask other people for help, I try to make it also very specific. Um, Things like what I'm asking is, will you meet with me once every 2 weeks for an hour? Will you answer my emails? And I'm going to submit a grant in December. Can you read that in October? So that you can do these things. That's a lot more specific than, will you mentor me?
Right.
And sometimes, people ask me to help them on things. They go, "Well, I need you to meet with me every week." I'm like, I'm stretched thin. I can't do that, but I can meet with you once a month, or I can, do XYZ. And, then you come to some understanding of what we're actually promising each other.
Yeah, and along with that, it's a little off the mentoring thing, but it's a great idea to have somebody read your application that's just anybody, not somebody that is specifically in tune to or an expert in that area, just to make sure it makes sense. Sometimes you get so involved in it and you say like, it makes perfect sense to me. I don't know why these people are saying that it doesn't make sense or whatever. And just have another person who's written a grant to just read it, even if it's not in their expertise, and say like, well, I didn't really understand this, or this was complicated, or, I don't think the mentor said enough in that letter. Just get somebody to look at it and over it to make sure that it makes sense. I do that all the time to have someone read something because it makes total sense to me. I wrote it, but it doesn't always make sense to the reviewer. So it's a good idea to have somebody look at it.
And your universities might have people like me who do that as their main job. So definitely check your university resources. And if you don't know, let me know and I can try to find somebody for you. So, Joe, looks like
Thank
you have a
you.
question.
Yeah, hey, this is Joe Finney from Washington University in St. Louis. I had a question more generally about the K application process, or more formally, the review process. I've been told that that is the landscape of K reviews and study sections has changed over time. I don't know if anyone has any insight or comments on how that might affect funding processes or chance of getting funded or those types of things.
You mean for K-23s? Regular K-23s? So
Yeah,
interest,
just yeah, external Ks in general. Yes.
interestingly, I had a nice discussion about this yesterday with a project officer of my other K-12. And that, because a lot of people, all the people who have the NIDA K-12s had all gotten together and they were freaking out about the fact there weren't any NOFOs past November around K-12s and all this other stuff and around other Ks. And their they're telling me that first of all, they're really late in getting out a lot of program announcements, but they're also that all of NIH is trying to do this centrally. So instead of by institution, so that they're going to put out program announcements regarding different areas, um, sort of centralized, and that process is happening now. They are not um, they are not thinking that the government is not interested in case. They understand that, at least all the project officers understand that, but they did ask me to tell everyone to let all of your Congress people know that case are very important. And they asked me to just send a note to sort of the second in command of NIDA, a couple of people in NIDA, not the director, but these other people, one in charge of training programs and the other person who's like the deputy director who's interested in training. Just send a note and say, oh, just so you know how exciting that these Ks have been, that they're really important for the pipeline and blah, blah, blah. So we probably all need to do that, but they were not worried that somehow there weren't going to be Ks. But a lot of people, when you go and you look at stuff, they have these notice of funding awards, and they're all kind of up soon. Like the last one is up for in November or something, and you don't see any extensions. And they said that's just because one, we're very late, but two, in this particular field of Ks, that they are trying to the leadership of somehow would like this to be more centralized. And so they are in the process of working that out, and that we should eventually see more program announcements, but there'll be generalized program announcements.
And I think it's similar for the review process too. We talked with one of the program officers who manages the Ks at NINDS recently. And I know most of the scholars were there, but traditionally, most institutes like NINDS reviewed their Ks all together in one single study section. and now NIH has centralized all reviews. So the NIDS program officer said like last round, all the Ks were reviewed across like 70 study sections. So it was more, you might have more like content experts reviewing the Ks, but they might not be K experts. So I don't know if the co-directors have thoughts on that, but it has the review process has changed.
I don't know that any of us know exactly how. And I would say the review process in general drifts, right? I think, for however long I've done this relative to Cliff, Gail, and Bob, things do drift. And what people are looking for in review, all of a sudden, what was okay 3 years ago is no longer okay today. So that is not new, right? And but I do think that the structure that is now being put in place and how that will play out, I don't unless Bob, Gail, or Cliff know, I don't have a good sense of how that's going to play out, unfortunately.
No, I don't think anybody knows. It's almost like, you're losing some of the institutional memory. Instead of having these study sections that are within each institute, now it's in the general pool. So the general principles we're talking about are probably even more important because you're going to have reviewers from a broader base looking at your application.
It's frustrating. There's no way of saying this, but we'll get over this, right? There's no rhyme or reason to it. Sometimes you're just going to get people sometimes that have no idea what the content is, which sometimes can be good because they won't be as picky. But in another situation, they may say stupid things
Yeah.
and they're only reviewing, a quarter of what they normally would. So you don't have a second or a third reviewer saying, "Hey, that's not true. She or he wrote all this stuff. This is legit. This is good." So you don't have that back and forth. So that is difficult. But also, if you get any type of score, the agency or the institute is able to pick anything they want. It's not necessarily by score, and that's due to the priorities at Institute. So it's always a good idea to talk with the project officers of each of these institutes to know what the priorities are, know that you're submitting something. They'll look for it, they'll advocate for you. And we'll see. I mean, I I wish I could be more clear, but it's not clear. The system is not clear, and who knows? I'm working through this myself on something big that I'm trying to get funded.
We have a few more minutes. Any other questions, either specific to the K-12, NIH Ks, or even, our grants were related?
Megan, I'll sort of piggyback onto what Gail just said. The only other, so I met with Jeremy Brown, who's the head of the Office of Emergency Care Research, maybe a couple of weeks ago. And the one thing Jeremy said that I think we should be aware of is the program officers have more latitude, is the anticipation. And he said things like don't submit a grant without talking to the program officer ahead of time and those sorts of things. And so, what that means and how responsive your individual program officer will be is a separate issue. And I think in general, though, the training officers are very, very supportive, right? They're genuinely committed and dedicated to trying to help people launch their careers. And so if you're submitting an NIH K of any sort, I would strongly suggest you engage with the program officers.
And I mean, I think for all of you, you guys have met Tish. So like she is in charge of the training program for NIDS. So, Tish always says you can reach out to her directly. If you don't feel comfortable with that, you can always reach out to me or the co-directors and ask to facilitate that communication. But like NIDS is clearly very committed to supporting you guys. So, and the same is true for NIA and NIDA and the other institutes, but we're always happy to facilitate those communications. Other questions or concerns? All right. I think that was a long enough pause.
Pause. Yeah, if you need us, you can always reach out.
Yeah. All right, everyone. Well, thank you so much for coming. If you do have final questions, let us know. But we'll look forward to those of you who are new applications and scholars. We know you'll be working on your NIH applications sooner rather than later. So always looking forward to seeing how you guys progress and how we can support. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.